All right. Well, good afternoon or good morning for those of you who are in BC. Welcome to our presentation of two modules for Stage 2, Language for Post-Secondary Education. My name is Marijke Geurts, and my co-host and co-developer is Dori Tarjan.
Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Also, a huge thank you up front to Paul Carter, who will be our moderator today. Before we begin, I would like to say that New Language Solutions is based in Ottawa, Ontario. We acknowledge that our head office is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Beyond Ottawa, we have staff working in locations across Canada. New Language Solutions is grateful to have the opportunity to work as a guest in communities and territories across the country, and we honor the stewardship of many Indigenous peoples who have resided on these lands since time immemorial. We make our acknowledgement as a sign of respect for all Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, past and present. We accept the true impact of the past and the pain suffered by generations of Indigenous peoples. As an agency that works to support the integration of newcomers into Canadian society and cultures, we resolve to support activities that are inclusive of Indigenous peoples. We will make our best efforts to address a history of injustice to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We encourage our frontline staff and clients to discover whose traditional territories they live on and pause to reflect on the hospitality shown to us as guests in these territories. And personally, I live in the beautiful Woolastook Valley in New Brunswick. So this is our agenda for today. We'll be looking at two modules under the post-secondary education theme. For CLB 5-6, communicating about choices for college. And for CLB 7-8, deciding on a college program. We'll have a couple of polls, and if you have any questions, you can hold them until halfway or until the end, or you can post them in the chat so that we can discuss them if applicable. If there's time, we can also do a short live demo at the end of the modules, at the end of our presentation. The theme of post-secondary education can be very important to newcomers for a variety of reasons. Maybe they have children that are in high school and preparing to go to college or university. But it's also very likely that a new Canadian wants to go back to school themselves to upgrade their skills or to receive a Canadian diploma. So in our first poll, please check the reasons why this topic is important to your learners. Who's going to share the poll, guys? So why is the topic of post-secondary education important to your learners? For their children's education, to return to school, to update their skills, to attend bridging programs, or because they want to change their career. So children's education, updating skills, bridging programs, and career change. So not to return to school themselves. That's interesting. And I'll share the results for you guys as well. That's interesting. So Dori, could you tell us a little bit more about the different modules that MLS currently has under this theme?
Certainly. There are two modules that have been available on Avenue for the last year. These two modules practice language and skills that learners will need while studying at a college or university. In the CLB 5-6 module, developing academic and research skills, learners practice following and giving instructions in a classroom, as well as interpreting and describing charts and graphs. In the CLB 7-8 module, working in academic groups, they learn about the roles and functions of a study group, and they practice communicating about online applications. Now, let's look at the newly available and some of the upcoming modules. While the two modules I just mentioned focus on skills that learners will need while in school, the new modules practice skills that one will need while looking into different schools or choosing a program to apply for. In the CLB 5-6 module, Communicating About Choices for College, learners will practice communicating about preferred activities and college programs those might be relevant to, and finding out more information about institutions through open houses and emailing with program advisors. In the CLB 7-8 module, Deciding on a College Program, learners will look more closely at information related to schools and programs by reading and taking notes on detailed program descriptions online and watching virtual tours of colleges. And we also wanted to include a sneak peek of our upcoming modules in this theme. These modules will focus on financial aid for post-secondary students at different CLB levels. So learners will research and compare different types of financial aid and look into the application process, like how to request a loan or how to apply for a bursary and so on. But for now, let's take a closer look at the CLB 5-6 module, Communicating Choices for College. This module can serve as a starting point for learners who are interested in pursuing post-secondary education, but don't know which school or program to choose. Within each skill, the competency is interacting with others. We found that lessons of academic English often focus on reading strategies or writing essays, but social interaction can easily get overlooked under this theme. The module starts with a comprehensive overview of the differences between formal and informal communication in English. While in the listening and speaking tasks, learners will encounter dialogues among friends. In the reading and writing tasks, they will focus on more formal communication, that with a college program advisor. To make our module consistent, we chose 4 college programs that are used as examples throughout the activities. These are hospitality, culinary arts, early childhood education, and personal support worker program. Of course, if you know of other programs that your learners are interested in, you may want to modify some of the activities. Now, let's look at the real-world tasks of this module. In this module, learners will listen to a group of friends talking about activities they enjoy or don't enjoy doing, talk about their likes and dislikes of different activities from the perspective of choosing a school program, read an email from a college counselor, and write an email to the college counselor to express their feelings about an open house. And we have arrived to our second poll. So let's stop here. We were wondering which of these 4 tasks do you think your learners would find the most challenging or would need the most practice with? So we have listened to friends talk about activities, share likes and dislikes, read a formal email and attachment, or answer an email from an advisor. So learners would need most practice with the reading and the writing tasks. Thank you. Let's look at the module activities in more detail now. Each module opens with a Getting Started section, where learners get to familiarize themselves with the module vocabulary, some grammar, and get a general idea of the tasks that will follow. So first, learners review the module glossary and complete a practice activity with the words and expressions related to post-secondary education that will appear in this module. In the introduction forum, they will share their experience with communicating in English in formal and informal contexts. And there is an online grammar activity where they practice using different structures to express likes and dislikes. To give you an idea about the activities in the Getting Started section, here's a slide from the grammar practice. So on the first couple of slides, learners have practiced using different structures to express likes and dislikes, like the ones you can see here. After that, on this last slide, they will have to identify the speaker's feelings in these expressions and categorize them based on the meaning. Marijke, could you tell us about the listening activities?
Yeah, certainly. So as Dori just explained, under the Getting Started section, learners have already explored some vocabulary, grammar, and questions around formal and informal language. The first skill in this module is listening, but because it's still the beginning of the module, these skill building tasks are the building blocks for other skills as well. In the skill building task, identifying formal and informal language, learners learn more about the difference between the formal, semi-formal, and formal registers and when these are used in spoken and written language. This activity, therefore, supports all four skills. Dori already mentioned that the speaking and listening tasks in the module use informal language, and the reading and writing tasks use a more formal style. The skill building, opening, maintaining, and closing a conversation supports both listening and speaking. As with almost all of the activities in this module package, there's an online practice task and an in-class component with a handout. The activity expressing likes and dislikes builds on the grammar skill building in the Getting Started section, which you've just seen. And this is an in-class activity for learners to recognize and use idioms to express what they like and don't like. For CLB 6, there's an additional online activity to make sure that they get to practice this competency at the appropriate level. Access to this online activity is restricted, as you can see here, based on the link level in the student's profile. So please make sure that your learners have an updated profile, or they may not be able to access this task. The skill using and assessment tasks in this module have all been differentiated by level as well. So when done online, learners will only see the activity that corresponds with their link level. These tasks are also available on paper if you prefer to do them in class, but then you won't have the benefit of automatic grading. I would like to explain how the tasks for CLB 5 and 6 are different. Both levels listen to a conversation between three friends, talking about their career interests and what program they might want to take when they go to college. For the skill using task, Rhonda, Samira, and Giorgio discuss PSW and ECE. At CLB 5, however, one of the three speakers only has a limited role. Sorry, Giorgio, making the audio a little bit shorter. The speed and tempo is a bit slower at CLB 5 than at CLB 6, and CLB 5 does not have the background noise of a busy cafeteria. There's also some difference in grammar. At CLB 6, we used more contractions and conditional verbs. Naturally, there are a few more questions at CLB 6 to cover additional criteria for this particular competency. The assessment task is very similar to the skill using. In this task, we hear Maria, Juan, and Ali talk about careers in the hospitality sector, and Juan plays a smaller part at CLB 5. Before I hand it over to Dori, I would like to give a shout out to all of the team members who've helped us to make these recordings. We had a lot of fantastic people contributing their time and talent. Dori, what can you tell us about the speaking tasks?
Well, as Marijke mentioned, the skill building activities under listening are closely connected to the speaking tasks. While learners got familiar with the features of formal and informal communication in the previous skill building tasks, now under speaking, they will focus more on nonverbal communication and conversation strategies. In the first skill building activity, reading facial expressions, learners will watch a video online about the importance of different facial expressions and answer questions about the video. And in the second skill building, they first review expressions to indicate non-comprehension in an online H5P, then practice using the expressions in class. The in-class portion of this activity is very similar to the upcoming skill using and assessment tasks, as learners practice talking about activities that they enjoy. As with most the skill building activities, the online activity, which typically is self-correcting, prepares learners for the in-class practice, where they get to interact with each other and try the new skills in real life. The skill using and assessment tasks for speaking are very similar. In both tasks, learners have a conversation in pairs about college programs and different activities. Learners will use what they practiced in the skill building activities, expressing likes and dislikes, reading facial expressions, and indicating non-comprehension where necessary. As the length of the task and the evaluation criteria between CLB 5 and 6 are different, we suggest that learners with the same benchmark work together on these tasks. Similarly to the listening, skill using, and assessment tasks, these tasks also have an online version and an in-class option. When completed online, learners will work on these tasks in the big blue button using breakout rooms. To guide learners in their conversations, we created task cards with information about specific college programs. Let's take a quick look at these task cards. There are different sets of cards for the skill using and the assessment task. I mentioned earlier that we used 4 programs, college programs, as examples to run throughout our module: hospitality, culinary arts, ECE, and PSW. So here you can see the kind of information learners will have during the speaking task. And of course, you may want to develop your own task cards based on college programs that you know are relevant to your learners. Now let's take a look at the reading tasks.
Thank you, Dori. As we mentioned earlier, the tone of the written texts we present in this module is a lot more formal. So even though the competency is still interacting with others, in the reading tasks, learners are exposed to a different kind of language. As you recall, the module started with skill building around formal and informal language, and you may want to review the last part of that activity here. There's only one additional skill building task for reading. The activity begins with a class conversation about purpose. Then learners read a message from a link instructor to her class about a field trip and answer questions. With a partner, learners read a second email for which they use strategies to understand new vocabulary. This classroom component is followed by an online activity where learners read the same email again and answer questions. And you can assign the online quiz for homework or have learners complete them on their device in class. As usual, the online activity is self-correcting, but we strongly urge you to follow up in class the next day. In the skill using task, learners read a personalized email from an advisor at Casgrain College to Giorgio Yes, he's back for a reprise. All jokes aside, we try to use the same topics and where possible the same people throughout the module. And we hope that this will make it easier for learners to connect knowledge and skills gained in one skill to other language tasks and create a realistic situation. And I invite you to share your thoughts about this approach in the chat. Again, there are skill using and assessment tasks at 2 levels. So I'll show you a screenshot of the assessment task. In the assessment task, learners read a message to Samira, another familiar name. At CLB5, learners only read an email. But at CLB6, learners also get the attachment that was sent with this message. And this is how the reading task is differentiated for the 2 benchmarks. Dori, do you have another example of how activities in this module are connected with each other?
I sure do. As you have seen in the reading tasks, learners receive an email from a college advisor, whereas in the writing tasks, they will send an email to the advisor referring to the open house they attended, which, not coincidentally, was also part of the CLB6 reading task. But let's not jump ahead. There is one skill building activity where we go back to the difference between formal and informal style in written language. Learners first identify the formality of common phrases used in email messages, and then they sort out 2 emails that got mixed up, a formal and an informal message from the same person about similar topics. A second part of the skill building task is a forum activity where learners get to practice writing a formal email themselves. After they post their email in the forum, they also give feedback to one of their peers. And now let's circle back to the message and the invite from a program advisor about a college open house. Here in the writing skill using and assessment task, learners will write a formal email to the program advisor expressing their feelings about the open house they attended. The task does offer some flexibility. Learners can choose which program's open house they want to refer to, as opposed to the speaking task where they had the program specified on the task card. I wanted to mention a technical difference between the skill using and the assessment task for writing. We decided to use 2 different activity types for the 2 tasks to make the feedback process more convenient and more flexible. So for the skill using task, we set up a Moodle quiz so that learners can complete a self-evaluation form at the end. At the same time, the instructor is still able to provide corrective feedback and the final score for this task. As for the assessment task, we chose Moodle assignment, where it is the easiest to provide feedback using a rubric. So let's take a look at an example of a rubric. This is the rubric for the writing assessment task for CLB5. The rubric already has the evaluation criteria and the scoring. So for each submitted task, the instructor will need to click on the appropriate score for each criterion, and the task will calculate the final score. There is also space for comments at the end of each row, as well as below the rubric for overall comments. And this concludes the first module that we wanted to present to you. We would like to take a short break at this time to see if there are any questions about this module before we move on to the next module. Paul, are there any questions in the chat?
No, everyone's just been posting very positive comments so far. Everyone's really enjoying what they're seeing. You're very clear as well. It's easy to follow. This is an excellent webinar. I love the material too, the
That's
differentiation between the levels and tacking on that attachment there. That's a really nice touch. I commented in
Thank
the
you.
chat too, the style of your emails, the mock-up that you have there, that's excellent. really, it's almost like real world, you know? No questions so far, but a lot of positive feedback. So.
Thank you. Well, then I guess we should move on to the CLB 7-8 module, Marijke.
Yeah, for sure. That's so nice to hear that everybody's enjoying what they're seeing so far.
Oh, hang
But
on.
we'll,
I'm sorry. I'll just
oh,
interrupt. I'm sorry. I did notice that Margaret unmuted for a moment. Maybe she had a question?
Yes, I have a quick question. I think
sure.
it's easier to ask it like that, not to type
Mhm.
it. I have a
Yeah.
question about differentiating between the levels. I've noticed sometimes you have separate activities, skill building activities for CLB5 and a separate one for CLB6. And then in the skill using is two CLBs together. So I mean, just what made you do it this way? Like what guided you in making these choices?
That's a really good question, Margaret, because typically for skill building, we would use the same activity for CLB5 and CLB6. But there's just this one time where CLB6 had something, if you look at the requirements in the CLBs, there was something that was very different in CLB6 that CLB5 just doesn't need to, they're not required to be able to do that just yet. So that's the reason why we addressed it in a separate CLB6 skill building task. The skill using and the assessment activities will always be differentiated by level because the criteria are different. So for example, with the rubrics, there's going to be a CLB5 rubric and then a CLB6 rubric. Sometimes on paper, those might be merged. So it's the same piece of paper, but then you can still see the differences between CLB5 and CLB6. Does that make sense when I say it like
Yes,
that?
yes. I was just curious because I just noticed that. And I think that's excellent that you were able to implement that because sometimes it's very difficult, even for the instructor, to see the differences between the
Yeah.
levels. So I think it's a great choice. I love everything that you have done. It's really well done. And I really like how much attention to detail you paid in those activities. So
Yeah, well, we have a
great job.
very good reviewer. Our PBLA lead keeps us on track.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Okay.
So I guess we can continue with the CLB 7-8 module and take a look at that. So even though the information in this module, deciding on a college program, might be just as important for your CLB 5-6 learners who are interested in post-secondary education, we want to caution you to use these materials at the intermediate levels. We feel the skill building tasks in this 7-8 module are at the high end for 5-6, and you may use them with sufficient scaffolding, but the skill using and assessment tasks are certainly not appropriate for CLB 5-6. So if you have a mixed level class, you might have to change a couple of things here and there. So before starting this 7-8 module, please make sure that your learners have some awareness of the Canadian education system and the role of colleges, that they have an awareness of career choices in Canada, some ability to navigate websites, and some understanding of the marketing purposes of virtual tours. In the module Deciding on a College Program, learners first watch a virtual tour of a college. Then they do research and find information online about a college program. They summarize and take notes to share with a friend. And finally, they give a presentation about a college program of their choice. So I have another poll for you. Which of these real-world tasks do you feel your learners need more or the most practice with? Or if you're not sure, which of these tasks do you think will benefit your learners the most? So which of these tasks do they need the most practice with, or which one will benefit your learners most? Actually, I realize those are two very different questions. So if I share the results with you, then you will see that giving a presentation about a program got the most answers. And that's the last activity of the module. So we'll get to that. Right. So the Getting Started section of the module has a few online activities, such as the glossary with vocabulary drawn from the listening and reading texts, and a practice activity for vocabulary. There's also an introduction forum to get the conversation going about the topic and to elicit from learners what they already know and what they would like to learn, etc. In the paper module package, you will also find goal-setting pages tailored to the learning objectives in this module and some great ideas to practice vocabulary in class. Now, Dori, would you tell us a little bit more about listening and reading in this module?
Sure thing. The first skill in this module is listening. And so the skill building activities prepare learners for the real world task of watching a virtual tour of a college. In the first skill building, learners listen to a monologue online and identify different language functions and vocabulary related to describing college campuses, programs, faculty, etc. The in-class component of this task provides an opportunity to practice the expressions learned in the online component. In class, learners will talk about one of their own school experiences using connecting words and phrases. It is during the second skill building activity that learners watch their first virtual tour, that of the Albany Law School. This skill building activity focuses on the difference between direct and implied meaning. Because learners might not be familiar with the features of virtual tours, we wanted to follow a more moderate pace. So let me explain. The skill building activity starts with the in-class component where learners watch the video and discuss several aspects of it in class, such as the purpose of making virtual tour videos, the style, the choice of words, and so on. The goal is for learners to get familiar and comfortable with the video in class. In the online component, they will watch the same video again and answer further comprehension questions. On this slide, you can see the online activity, which is an interactive video, and an example question that learners answer while watching. In the skill using and assessment task, learners watch virtual tours of 2 imaginary colleges and answer comprehension and applied questions. A little background information here. The same 2 imaginary colleges appear in the listening and the reading tasks. And even though we tried our best to make them look and sound like real Canadian colleges, they are not. So if some of your learners feel tempted to apply to them, just gently remind them that they cannot. The skill using and the assessment tasks are set up in a similar way. They are in the form of Moodle quiz, so the majority of the questions are auto-corrected. However, the applied questions do require manual scoring. A technical difference between the 2 tasks is that while the skill using allows 2 attempts, for the assessment task, learners can only submit their answers once. In these tasks, learners at both levels watch the same video, but at CLB 8, learners answer slightly different comprehension and additional applied questions. Now let's take a look at the reading task. Reading is the second skill in this module. The 2 skill building activities prepare learners for 2 different aspects of the skill using and the assessment task. So while in the listening section, we got familiar with colleges as institutions. We looked at the campus tour, extracurriculars, residents, so on. Here in the reading section, the focus is more on specific college programs and their details, ideal candidates, different courses, potential career paths, and so on. In the first skill building, navigating a website, learners first review basic terminology and navigation using Avenue as an example in class. Then, in the online component, they complete a series of self-correcting activities. The second skill building activity looks at program descriptions in detail and uses the PSW program as an example. Learners read the program descriptions from the two colleges I mentioned earlier and answer comprehension questions. At this point, the text is provided as a PDF, so no navigation is required yet. For the skill using and assessment task, learners have to use both online navigation and comprehension of different program descriptions. As I mentioned before, we used the same two imaginary colleges for listening and reading. These are Clear Lake College and Casgreen College. It presented a bit of a challenge to imitate a college website without actually creating a college website. So in the end, we decided to use a wiki as it best replicates the type of navigation learners would have to do on an actual school website. I have to mention here that while wikis are typically used for collaborative learning and participants can freely add and edit the content, in our module, the wikis are locked, so the content cannot be changed. Since the navigation itself is part of the assessment, learners will have to access the web pages online, even if they answer the questions on paper. So each wiki has several pages, such as homepage, about us, admissions, and so on. And each school has 8 or 9 different programs. So learners will, in fact, have to navigate between the different pages to answer the comprehension and applied questions, both in the skill using and the assessment task. For CLB 7, learners will have to access and navigate one college website, while for CLB 8, learners will need both college websites to be able to answer the questions. And just like in the case of listening, the skill using task can be attempted twice, but the assessment task has only one submission. And again, most questions are auto-corrected, with the exception of the 2 or 3 more complex or applied questions where manual feedback is necessary. So now, after all the listening and reading, shall we look at the productive skills in this module?
That's a good idea, Dori. I think we've all had that experience of finding a really useful website, bookmarking it, and then not being able to find that really useful information again. And then we say to ourselves, I should have written that down, right? That's why we think it's important for learners to practice taking notes and reducing a text to an outline or summary, either for themselves or for someone else. Also, summarizing is part of the CLBs, and we wanted to offer more resources to practice this skill. In the first skill building activity, learners are presented with a one-page text, an outline, and a summary in paragraph style. They compare the 3 texts and discuss similarities and differences. The in-class activity is followed by an online task where learners read tips for summary writing. And then in the next skill building, summarizing a longer text, learners read a course description and identify the main ideas they would need to include in a summary. There's an H5P activity that practices paraphrasing the main ideas and using synonyms when writing a summary. And you can see from this screenshot that in class, they are given a structure to organize the information. And when done, they exchange their work with a peer. Yes, we did have a lot of fun coming up with schools and colleges such as Sweetgrass. For the skill using task, learners are asked to summarize information about Jane Goodall College. They read the admission requirements and a second page about scholarships. In the assessment task, learners read about the student residence and the hospitality program at Casgrain College and summarize that. The writing task is differentiated for CLB 7 and 8 by what learners are asked to produce. At CLB 7, they can write an outline, like a bulleted list. At CLB 8, the information has to be presented in a paragraph. So here's a screenshot of the text for the skill using task. It looks quite real, doesn't it? Although the information is modeled after real college admission requirements, sadly, Jane Goodall College does not exist either. The final skill in this module is speaking. And this is really the culminating task of the module, as learners will need to use everything they've practiced. And in the poll, you already indicated that speaking and doing a presentation is the skill that will need most practice or is most useful for learners. So each learner will research and present on a college program of their choice. But before we get there, let's look at the skill building tasks that support this skill. We begin with an online activity, improving nonverbal communication. Learners can do this independently. They read about several components of nonverbal communication and how they are important when giving a presentation. There's also a personality quiz. What kind of presenter are you? Are you aware and focused, quick and excitable, or slow and steady? If you want, I invite you to try it yourself by following the link, but please wait a few more minutes until the end of the webinar, and then you can let us know what your results were. If you feel that your learners need more practice with nonverbal communication, you might also use the facial expressions activity from the 5-6 module, which we've shown you before. In the next skill building activity, learners are given a PowerPoint template file to create their own presentation. If your learners are already pros at giving presentations, then you might want to skim over this task. If they need more practice in preparing for and giving presentations, then this is an excellent resource to give to the learners. It saves them time to create a presentation from scratch. They just have to choose from the slides in the template. Furthermore, the slides in the template are packed with tips and suggestions for giving a good presentation. They can use the information from the Casgrain and Clear Lake College websites with which they are already familiar. And learners also get a handout with a clear structure for the information they need to include in their practice presentation. Finally, for the skill using task, learners are going to research a real college program of their own choice and present the information to a small group of classmates. In doing their research, they might watch a virtual, that was too quick. In doing their research, they might watch a virtual college tour or watch a video about a certain program. They read web pages with information about a college and take notes from these. On the slides of the presentation, they will summarize the information. So you see all language skills come together in this task. Learners at CLB 7 only have to do the skill using task. We've set up big blue button rooms on the course if you're teaching an online program. The step up for CLB 8 comes mainly at in the assessment task, and we actually recommend that only CLB 8 learners complete it. For the assessment task, learners will give their presentation about 2 programs to the whole class instead of to a small group. Well, maybe not in a big auditorium like you see here on the slide. Learners now also have to explain why they want to attend this college. We hope that this will minimize the time needed in class to conduct the speaking assessments. And at the same time, it is our expectation that learners will be motivated and interested in learning about different college programs in their own area. And that does bring me to the end of our presentation. Maybe we can run one more poll. Which of these modules are you planning to use?
E, all of them.
Right. Would you use the CLB 5-6 module, the CLB 7-8, or both? Yeah, both. And I'm just talking about the modules that we presented on. I know there's many more modules on Avenue available. Well, it looks like everybody's responding both.
Yay.
That's great. Thank you. I'll share the results. That's really great. Okay. Also, if you have reviewed or used one of our modules, even if you've only used a couple of the activities, we really appreciate your feedback. And so I invite you to complete our feedback survey. The link is there on this slide.
Could you paste it into the chat?
I
I don't believe we can open them from the slide.
You're right about that. I don't know if I can. Dori, are you able to do
I can do that, yes.
from your
yes,
notes?
I have it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so then maybe you also want to put in the link to the personality quiz.
Oh, I typed that out.
Sure
So that's in
thing.
the
Oh,
chat
you
already.
typed it.
Positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
no,
so the survey link is in the chat now.
Thank you, Dori. And
No
thank you
problem.
both. These fantastic resources. There were questions in the chat, and one of
Okay.
them was mine, and one of them was Margaret's. We're curious how you created the content. Did you use ChatGPT at all? Did you? It almost looks like you've almost opened a school. So just curious how you created all the material to support this module.
Dori, how did you do that?
Sure. So yes, it was a big challenge, first of all, to find a name that does not actually exist. So I remember trying several versions. I really wanted to create a Terry Fox College, but it existed. So it was a lot of research and yes, because some of the schools have, or actually both of them have 8 or 9 programs with detailed descriptions. I did use ChatGPT for the programs that were sort of distractors, like woodwork, that I don't know much about. So yes, I went through a lot of existing college program descriptions, and I also got some additional ideas.
Yeah.
Yes.
May I ask,
So
did you get images from somewhere? Like there's a 13-minute tour video there of, I think it was Casgrain College.
Yes,
What?
both of them are similar in length. We got the images from Getty Images and
Unsplash.
also on Unsplash. That's right.
It's a really good question, and thank you for asking that, because the resources that we develop at New Language Solutions are all developed under a Creative Commons license, which means that if we're using anything that's already existing, that has to be released under a Creative Commons license. if it's not CC, then we have to create it ourselves. So for example, the Albany Law video, that was one video that we found during our research phase, preparing for this module, that was Creative Commons. So we were able to take that and actually modify it to slow it down and to cut out some of the scenes that were not relevant. So that's something that we usually try to do, is find real materials that we can use under a Creative Commons license. And if that's not possible, then based on the research that we found and what is expected of learners at a certain level, we draft our own texts and scripts and make our own videos, and as best as we can.
Well, I think you're about ready to open a school, so that's amazing. There are no more questions in the chat at the moment. Does anyone want to unmute their microphone to ask a question?
Yes, I have a question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I have to say, amazing, what an amazing job you did, because I know how much work goes into creating any even small image or a piece of text that replicates, you know, the real world text that would appear on a web page. So it's just amazing. You did an amazing job, and I know how much work goes into that. So kudos to you. It's really great. And these are very, very useful modules. I have a question. When do you think they will be published to the content builder, to the course builder on Avenue?
They should be there
they are.
already.
Oh, they are already there? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't check that. Because and so when do you think this webinar will be posted on the Avenue webpage? So I wanted to direct the ESL instructors to it, so they can watch it if anybody's interested, and then get more information about the modules.
Yeah. So the modules, as Dori said, are already on the course builder.
Mhm.
I'll wait for this video to upload, and then I might have to do a little bit of editing.
Mhm.
But today is Wednesday.
Yeah.
At the latest next week, and we'll post in the teacher only forum when the
Mhm.
video is available.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
is
Paul
this?
posted the link to the course builder. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, excellent. So thank you. And is this series of modules completed, or are you still working on it? Like the next few? I don't know.
We are working on the next modules on financial aid right now,
Okay.
and I think those will be the final modules in post-secondary. Not sure.
No, I think there's two more after, once those two financial modules are done, there's two more under post-secondary education.
So you release them as they get completed, right?
Yes.
That was actually what
Yes.
I was trying to get from, yeah, my first question. Perfect.
Yeah.
And the last question, are you planning to have something developed on getting the educational credentials evaluated? Any kind of information or any kind of activity around that?
That is actually the last topic for CLB 7-8, is looking at credentials at form, like I forget what the exact topic is, but that topic has already been approved by CCLB to do a set of modules for 5, 6, and 7, 8 about foreign credential recognition, or upgrading your skills if you want to become a plumber or a nurse, or what that process looks like. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay.
Any
Wow,
other
that's all.
questions?
No, I don't see any more in the chat. That was an excellent webinar. So clear. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very pleased with everybody's participation. Thank you for answering our polls. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. And yeah, enjoy the modules.